And you're live.
Aloha snack bar, everyone. It's the one, the only, the Senor Silverback, and I'm back with the flux man, the flux capacitor. I'm sorry, the the master of the flux capacitor, and none other than Monica Perez, who is back with us again, shining her light onto the world situation and giving her insights the only way she knows how. And I don't think you guys need any introductions. If you do, just go back to the first show and you can get the whole rundown and bio of Monica's extensive background, which I spent 3 minutes explaining to everyone. With that being said, Monica, welcome back.
Thank me.
How's it going?
Good.
Long time no speak.
Yes.
Long time no speak.
Well, if you're talking about like news time, like dog years, news
forget
years,
about it.
how much can happen in a week? It's incomprehensible over a human lifetime.
Yep. Absolutely. Where do you want to begin? I mean, let's untie this ball of yarn called current events. Like, where do you want to begin? Where do you want to start?
I want to start with Vault 7.
All right, we're going right to Vault 7. Yeah. Let's go. Let's. All
right. So I'm super cynical. So I'm always looking for the angle, and I have a rule of thumb that if it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal every day for a week, and it's supposed to be bad for the deep state, it's a psyop. It's a psychological operation. They have a purpose to it, and it's theirs to prove to me that it's not real, that it's not a psyop. And anything Julian Assange has anything to do with, I feel like he's a honeypot that attracts real whistleblowers and gets them stuck in the quicksand. And I thought Edward Snowden, I don't know how deeply you dug into that, but for me, that was for sure psyop. There's a lot of evidence pointing to that. I don't want to necessarily dig into that, but this Vault 7, to me, I think it's a psyop. I think it's real. I think the information is real. It's a limited hangout, so they put stuff out there to make it, give it credibility, but they have a purpose, and I feel like I have a good guess as to what that purpose is.
Okay. Go ahead.
I can tell you more about the details, all the different facets of Vault 7 that I think play into their hands. But let me just start with the big, the big one, the punchline first, which is that if you look at our defense budget, just generally, it's half of the world's defense. So the entire world combined is the same as we are when it comes to defense.
Correct.
So how do you justify like what Trump asked for, what he described as the largest increase in defense spending in history, when even if everybody were on the same side and against us, which they aren't, we could still whoop them according to the numbers. So how do you justify that? You have to give away your, just -1 or whatever the last generation technology, or 10 generations ago, whatever, depending on how far advanced you are. You always have to give that technology away in order to justify your need to level up. So like Oppenheimer from the Manhattan Project gave the bomb to Stalin because they weren't moving fast enough to justify an arms race, a Cold War for the military-industrial complex. Right. And then I believe we gave Iran Stuxnet. We gave them a drone. We let them crash a drone on purpose so that they would have more advanced technology. Plus, we always sell people technology. We sell them defense stuff. Right. Smuggle them defense stuff all the time. So for me, that we have to arm the world to justify our arms-based economy. So that's number one here. This is going to justify a total revamping of the cyber security system, tons more money. It'll also justify cracking down on insider threats, which I saw coming with the Flynn thing. And there are a lot of other little details that make me think this is Edward Snowden 2.0. One thing is to pick up where he left off, it starts in 2013. They didn't have to attach it to a human being, so it can go on forever. And both of them said, we just wanted to start the discussion of what we want, which is, why would you fall on your sword to start a dumb chatter when really anyone who really cares about this stuff wants to restore the Bill of Rights, for example.
Yeah. Right. Wow, that's an incredible statement. And you know what? It makes a lot of sense because there's one thing, and I do agree with you on that. I'm still trying to rack my brain around is this. We spent close to $600 billion in our ridiculously overblown military budget, which is 10 times more than the next closest nation. Why on earth increase it all the more? If anything, there's more waste in the Defense Department than anywhere else. There's no reason for 900 overseas bases in 134 countries. Waste. There's no reason for the ridiculous failure that the F-35 fighter jet is. Waste. There's no reason for these upcoming pet projects. Like we have a new naval warship. It's a gunship, but it has no guns, and it breaks down half the time. You know, I mean, waste. So
yeah, more money is for sure not the answer. If they're so incompetent that they can't take half the world's military budget and pick off the enemies one by one, the problem is not the money.
Right. The problem is not the money. So the question becomes, who gets the money and where's this money going? Where is it going to go next? Because already we have this overblown military budget. We have military bases all over the friggin' planet. I could only think of one way and where it's going to go. I think it's going to go domestic. What say you, Monica? I'm getting a sense it's going domestic, and maybe your angle of Volt 7 being a false flag where it can turn that security apparatus more inward. I mean, that's starting to make a lot of sense to me.
They're insisting that specifically the CIA, which your guest said on Wednesday, Cliff, that the CIA is outward facing and the NSA is inward facing. Yeah. But like you see with the invasion of Iraq after 9/11, they don't actually have, there doesn't need to be any linear connection among the dots for them to justify what could easily be the next level of big cybersecurity act, where the whole thing is total information control. For me, it's surveillance, censorship, and propaganda. So right. all of that, they just want total control of that, and they're moving towards it one step at a time. And this will be another argument for it. And I think that really big spending, a total revamp of systems, and tightening up like that insider threat thing where people aren't allowed to blow the whistle anymore. They're talking about
they're talking about getting rid of that?
No, sorry. Insider threat program was Obama administration's program where they went through like all internal organizations in the government and said, look, if your neighbor, your cubicle mate is getting a divorce and he seems cranky, you tell your supervisor or you have violated the insider threat code. You have to watch everybody all the time. It was like really a big deal at the time. Like it was like this was going overboard. And then when I saw Flynn get the business and Trump come out and say, hey, people, the leaks are the story, not the news is fake and the leaks are real. The leaks are the story, not Flynn's behavior. I saw that as signaling that we were about to have a leak crackdown. And the problem is not if there's a real national security interest. I would say national defense, which is very few actual things that they do are national defense, but it's that whistleblowers who come out and say you're violating the law. And so when I saw this Vault 7 thing talk about outside contractors, and I saw Trump say we really need to tighten up the number of reports in the different intelligence agencies, like it all looked like tightening up, controlling, so that if there's no information, no transparency, and the control's super centralized so that the president or whoever controls the president can access that apparatus, I mean, that's a true kind of police state, deep state apparatus mechanism. And I'm making sense. Is that too much? So this is how I'm thinking about it. I mean, I know that's why, like, I know a lot of people see the Trump phenomenon differently from how I see it. But for me, it was really the establishment's answer to the Tea Party. Like if you had Ron Paul as the leader of the grassroots disgruntled Americans, that's a real problem. But if you have a guy who believes in big government, who isn't an ideologue, who isn't going to fall on a sword for principles, who will put boots on the ground in Syria and bomb Yemen to smithereens, that the people will follow like an outsider, it gives you a lot more power, kind of like Obama, hope and change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very
Does that
interesting.
bum you out? I don't want to bum you
No,
out.
it's a good
It doesn't bum me out at all. You know, because one thing, I mean, one thing that the couple of things I can grasp at is I mean, there is a war in the deep state. I mean, there are factions that are fighting amongst themselves, and there's such
Yeah.
a fog of war to discern exactly, you know, what the heck's going on. It's you know,
I know they
it's
say
very
that.
difficult.
I know people say that, and I just I believe there is infighting at the different levels, but for me, I just don't think that's the dominant dynamic. I think if you think about organizations you've been in, whether it's a school or a
Yeah.
corporation, the culture, the viewpoint of the guy on top just cascades down. You don't get anywhere if you're outside of that. And like, look what Sessions is doing. He's just, slashing people. What you said he was doing about getting rid of all the Obama people. It doesn't take long to get rid of
Right.
that other faction. But it's interesting because it does look like there are two factions. It really, really looks like that. I mean, I'm finally thinking that the Democrats are actually on their heels. I still think there's a chance that the pendulum swings backwards, and like in the European elections and stuff, you're going to get a reaction to the Brexit and Trump and people begging for globalism and world government. I mean, that could be the big picture here. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's a little anywhere other than the absolute pinnacle of power, which I'm also not, certain of who's controlling it. I think there's infighting, but I feel like this stuff about censorship, surveillance, no matter which party's in charge, which faction, they all want that, and they're all working towards that.
Yeah, I mean, men in power always want some sort of level of censorship and control. There's no doubt about it. It's what brand are we going to get is the big question here. And one thing that we were heading towards is this. I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, so far the people that he has. I mean, he just put Huntsman as the new ambassador to Russia, which is a great move.
And he speaks Chinese. Like, that's a little weird.
Yeah, yeah, he speaks perfect Chinese. He has Chinese kids that he's adopted.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
cool.
his kids. Yeah, so he's a stand-up guy. Tillerson's great with working with the Russians as well. So it's a new world that's coming about, and how I think there's a lot of fratricide going on behind the scenes at this point. It's so difficult. I've never seen the fog of war this thick. So any sort of intel from any angle, I accept and I look at it and I dissect it. Even what you're saying, it's like I totally get it. I'm like, yeah, because it's very important that we look at all angles, even the angles that are completely uncomfortable to our paradigm.
Yes.
We have to.
I mean, I have been really on my heels after the Trump thing, because my paradigm did not allow for someone that really appears to be loose cannon, like he feels out of control. He says things that are so divisive, so destabilizing.
That is, and it's all done on purpose. The guy's a genius.
I mean,
look what he did like about a week ago. Now in Sweden, and then the media just jumped down his throat. There's nothing going on in Sweden. And then you had, CNN's Don Lemonhead. Lemonhead was like, well, the facts are not valid, the numbers. And then what happened? The next day, Rinkeby and Malbo just exploded in riots.
See, but I think that's that could have been the results of agents provocateur, that it could be a false flag.
It's very possible. But then you also look at I mean, again, there's the timing is quite remarkable. And then the timing also, where Trump, Saturday morning, Trump tweets out, hey, Obama hacked my phones. And then boom, Volt 7 on that the following, next few days.
See, if Obama had been in office, when that stuff was starting to get so hot and heavy by the end, that just about everything Obama said was immediately followed up by some mass shooting or terrorist thing. Like, I really want to stop guns, and then a bunch of little kids get killed. Like, so now I'm seeing that pattern again. If Trump says it, and it's just like the Kate Steinle thing, who I know people think that my thinking that was a psyop that kind of launched Trump's campaign is a bit of a stretch. I'm waiting. That guy, the supposed perpetrator's trial keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. It's not covered by the news. I think that story was baloney, and the media and the government supported it. So I've been watching for 2 years now almost, Trump saying things and then events shoring up these outrageous things he said. And for me, I have to entertain the possibility that that those things are created events.
Yeah, Mike, it's a very interesting, angle, and I thought some of those same things whenever they started coming out with the leaks, the timing of it and how it happened. The thing is, it would have to be very well orchestrated between the MSM and Trump's attacks on them, and also if you take into consideration, we're 50 days in, it would be very well orchestrated, the whole Hillary thing, as far as putting somebody in place like a Donald Trump, right? It's putting somebody in place that would be able to be a psyop against the American people. And then some of the actions that he's taken, I think, are kind of promising, as far as, abolishing the EPA, abolishing the Department of Education. I think those are good moves. And the one that continues to speak to me is appointing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to this vaccine safety commission, and honestly taking a look at some of those things. So that's what kind of keeps me optimistic a little bit, about hoping that some of these things will, begin to see some changes. But yeah, there's definitely some warning signs out there. So
you're saying like DeVos and Pruitt that's effectively shutting down those departments? Is that what you're saying? DeVos, like the Department of Education and
they're gutting it.
Gutting it, right? Okay,
yeah,
all right.
They're going to be gutting it.
There's a couple of elements to that I would say. First of all, one thing that has really changed in the way I look at these things is I feel like it's almost like Data from Star Trek, like positronic learning. That it's like a dynamic plan. So. Right. I look at Trump, they're saying, Keith Olbermann has these ridiculous videos, one of which is he must go, Trump must go, because, I think I might have mentioned this to you, because he doesn't believe in democracy, which is hilarious. Calling for the coup of a democratically elected person because he doesn't believe in democracy is just laughable on its face. However, right. What that speaks to is that these guys claim there's a legitimacy problem with Trump. He didn't really win. And we claimed that, or many on the right claimed that Obama had a legitimacy problem because he wasn't born in this country. And George W. Bush had a legitimacy problem because Gore really won. And I remember during the campaign, Ted Cruz had a legitimacy problem because he was born in Canada, and his parents, I think, were Canadian citizens at the time, and there was no possibility for dual citizenship, and he refused to answer that question unequivocally. And I thought, this guy, I think now, he was probably a plan B, but still with that legitimacy issue. And he would have also been super agitating, caused civil unrest because he was so socially conservative. It would have been these same themes about women and sexual identity and all that kind of stuff. So that I feel like now, I used to think it was very kind of linear. Now I feel like they can move in and out. Like Hillary doesn't even have to know about it to be playing a role, and they keep her quiet, and they're going to keep her quiet if she gets a bullet in the head, right? So that, I think, is possible. And don't forget, Trump has been practicing improv for 14 years. So his reality show stuff, and I just know this, I was an investment banker, and now I have a radio show. I knew nothing about broadcasting, and I was like, I don't know what to say. No one ever told me what to say at all. No one ever told me what I couldn't say. I would say outrageous things. They would just tell me how to say it, like, make sure you have your facts, don't scare people. Sometimes you can, get excited, but don't scream in their faces all the time. And you get the hang of, then you test the water. So if I said stuff about the mainstream media, people loved it. If I said stuff about the CFR, people loved it. If I said stuff about Obama, people loved it. I say stuff about Trump, people don't love that. And it's very quick to learn, like for Trump, to learn what he can say and what he can't say. And I just feel like it's just that it's outside of what I've ever seen before. So it looks really out there, but I feel like it might be tested territory, and kind of they know what it's going to lead to. And maybe the stuff like gutting the energy or gutting the EPA, gutting the Department of Education, doing the vaccine stuff is just a way to keep the people who believe in him believing, and ultimately let's see if the rubber hits the road.
Mm-hmm. I think the clear line of demarcation on his entire administration will rise and fall on one thing alone. Will we become more nationalistic? Will we, forge a path that seeks less involvement overseas? Will we be able to have peaceable, good trade negotiations and relationships with the two other superpowers that are on this planet, which is Russia and China? And what is our place in this world after, this whole economy at some point? It's going to go through a massive reset. Those are the lines of demarcation. Now, if I don't see any of that, number one, and number two, if I'm glad Sessions is whacking everybody that's been appointed by Obama, every attorney general that's out there, which is a good thing. We need. I've said this before with CJ. The American public is ready for blood. I need to see a high-profile arrest. Like I need.
That would be great. The pedophile stuff. Let's see it happen.
Bingo, exactly. That to me, more than firing. See, when you fire the 7th floor of the State Department, okay, I get it. That's like the rat's nest of the shadow government. That's what these secrets are. I get it. But if you're not arresting the Soroses, if you're not using existing laws like the JASTA law, and you're not using existing laws like the Patriot Act to go after real terrorists like George Soros and finding his assets, where his assets are frozen, where he's thrown in jail, okay? At least put a warrant out for his arrest or something, right? Where you're not using SWIFT to completely shut down any wire transfers in and out of any of the corporations he owns. Not using the NSA surveillance to find out where he's hiding everything. If we're not doing stuff like that, all we're doing is just removing the cobwebs while leaving the spiders in place.
I think for me, first of all, like that you mentioned Soros, that's at that level, I would start to be convinced. If it was somebody like Podesta or Flynn, even going to jail or being charged or convicted or whatever, I would not be convinced, because like Petraeus and Bradley Manning, these guys are out now. So they might have been part
Bradley Manning's really out now, but
I sometimes wonder, these guys are so I feel like the cross-dressing thing, this is super down the rabbit hole though, but I feel like a lot of these guys are actors. Like I think Edward Snowden is really an actor. I doubt he even ever worked for the NSA or Booz Hamilton or any of that. I think he's just an actor, and he's got this image, and like same thing with Julian Assange, this image. And I wonder if like Assange sneaks out of the Ecuador embassy in drag. I've seen a picture of him in drag, like unrecognizable. And I wonder sometimes if they get these guys who are like, oh, you have two totally different personalities you can slip in and out of. But they even make high-level sacrifices. I mean, JFK was a high-level sacrifice. Nixon, if you think Watergate was a coup, high-level sacrifice of an insider. So even Soros might not be enough for me. I want to see a step away from world government. I want to see the IMF lose some power. I want to see
that we're seeing. We're seeing that already.
You think? Okay, well maybe I'm not paying attention to it enough.
Yeah, just all you got to do is this. IMF's a joke. It hasn't been funded in over 2.5 years. China's the only one that's been funding it. And the IMF is going to get absorbed by the AIIB. On the world stage, the IMF is a joke. There's no real economic power within the G20 that takes the IMF seriously. That's all swinging to the AIIB and the NDB, the New Development Bank. That's where the power is going. But I agree with you.
But even so, right? Like, so those are the new powers, but they're the powers. They're central powers, are they not? I mean, they're not nationalists.
I mean, it's pretty interesting what's happening with the New Silk Road and the One Road One Belt initiative. Like for instance, the AIIB that has right now 57 nations that are members of the AIIB, and I think the head of the AIIB is an appointed Indian national, and this is a Chinese created bank. And U.S. and a lot of the Western quote unquote allies have signed up also to be members of this, because they cannot ignore what's being done with the New Silk Road and the physical economy that's being built around that because of the trade. What's left is it's again, the question is, you're seeing this shift between two global powers. We're seeing the corrupt, absolutely heinous Anglo-American Atlanticist arm that's really, infighting and falling away, and a new Eastern power rising. But we don't know exactly at this point what the outcome would be in the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years. It's hard to say. But but I get what you're saying in terms of like high profile, it has to be high profile.
Well,
for me, like a Clinton somebody.
The thing about having regional centralization of banks or whatever it is, I feel like the Trilateral Commission was established so that they could take the European, lateral unit, the North American lateral unit, and the Asian lateral unit, and regionalize that stuff, and then just stitch it back up later. So into the world government thing, so for me, I feel like I don't have anything that's that structured. I feel like there's a power behind it. That I used to think the BRICS or like the non-aligned thing was going to disrupt the West. And I used to think I had hope that Putin was the outsider. And then I don't have that hope.
It has disrupted the West. What does the West have left? I mean, look at the G7. I like to call them the insolvent seven.
Yeah. Here's the problem. Here's where I can't stitch this stuff together that way. Like, I can't just take it for what you see is what you get. Rockefellers, it's been documented repeatedly. They gave China technology. We gave China defense stuff, like, illegally. We've made them this powerhouse. Nixon opened the doors to that. I just can't help but think that there's a plan behind that. It didn't just get rogue,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
no way.
No, I'm not saying no way. No, I said, yeah. I mean, it's very possible. But but one of the things about these globalists, the way they behave, the way they act, is this. I mean, they spent trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars building up a global government, right? I mean, you see the Eurozone, that was their pet project,
especially Soros.
Yeah, absolutely. So they spent trillions of dollars on this. And they spent decades upon decades upon decades in planning. I remember back in '68, they were floating, bonds. JP Morgan was creating the bonds that eventually helped create the Euro bonds, and they did it right in Belgium through Euroclear, with the establishment of Euroclear. So this was way long in the works, and then to have it explode on them, because as so many prideful human beings, the elites are also prone to fail, and failure as well, and fail miserably. Their whole globalist one world government project has really hit some major road bumps, and it's fallen apart, because what the world's doing is they want trade. They don't want this centralized control over their lives. The nations want to seek their own destiny, and I think that's what we're seeing. That I think the concept that's being brought out by China and Russia is completely 180 degrees diametrically opposed to what was running by the West for the last several decades. It's complete opposite. It's not like, okay, you're going to do this, or else, we want your resources or else. I mean, just look at the trade agreements of the TPP. It's a horrendous nightmare versus like what's happening with the New Silk Road, where it's voluntary, it's mutually beneficial trade. I mean, look how China's winning Africa without even firing a gunshot, without any sort of exploitation whatsoever. Everything is fair, free, and equitable. It's incredible. And they're doing this because we're the ones who created the vacuum. What was our vacuum that we created? I
have an alternative theory that can kind of that could explain some of that stuff. This is just why I have my viewpoint is I look at the EU. The EU even had a hard time getting monetary union, and they definitely weren't going to get political union. Then when the debt crisis started in the EU, first of all, well, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but there were calls for political union as the only solution to the monetary crisis, that the problem was political disparity. And I remember at that time, it was a few years ago, it was after the crisis, so it was only a few years ago from now. George Soros said that he said fear of Russia will keep the EU together.
Correct.
So that the classic kind of problem, reaction, solution thing is just how governments operate. And if what they're trying to do, like think of it as the trilateral vision, if they're trying to keep that sew up that region, Europe, and the way they had to do it was to have this crisis, and then they're gonna have more political strength. I understand Brexit puts a wrinkle in that plan, but let's just talk about Europe. So then they can maybe sew up that regional entity. And another longer term thinking from coming out of Rockefeller and Brzezinski and stuff from way back when was this convergence between East and West. And the only way to do that would be to put the brakes on Western industrial development, really slow it down, and then at the same time ramp up China and Russia, the kind of Eurasian continent, so that, like a car and a transmission, the engine and the wheels, they have to be going roughly the same speed in order to sync. And that maybe that's what it's all about. I the way you describe it and the way I like to look at it in the New Silk Road, I mean, it really seems that they're leapfrogging the West, but I feel like that, and maybe that's the point at which it just got out of control. But I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't count them out yet.
Well, let's look at it this way. About a month ago, we had the first freight train arrive in London, and that freight train came all the way from Shenzhen, China. That's incredible, right? So
wow, that's super cool.
If you look at and I'll give you an example. Look at President Park Geun-hye Lee, the now deposed president of South Korea.
That's
right?
Super scary. Regime change.
Right. It was absolutely regime change, just like they did to Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. It's the same thing. Okay? It's the same Western proxies. Now check this out. What was Park Geun-hye Lee saying, last year especially? I mean, this woman was, she got elected. She was out in Uzbekistan. She was in the capital of Turkmenistan and all the Eastern European nations within the Caucasus. And she was saying this. She was saying that the New Silk Road shall run from Busan, which is the southernmost city in, the second largest city in South Korea. And it's a port city. It will run from Busan all the way, and it will end in London. So what the Chinese have been proposing, working with their Eastern partners like the Koreans and even the Japanese, they've entreated the Japanese about this, and the Japanese have in the process of striking energy deals with China to have pipelines run. The vision of the New Silk Road is not leapfrogging and leaving the West behind, but bringing the West in place, because what the Chinese and the Russians and many of the people that are in the BRICS, which is right now 105 countries, what they're starting to see is that the paper wealth of the West, that especially the U.S., which has flooded the world, that paper fictitious phony baloney economy is about to collapse. It's going to end, and this new coming, a lot of people have talked about it. This global economic reset and things of that sort is going to require real physical economy. It's going to require manufacturing. It's going to require, and again, we're seeing the reemergence of gold as a trade settlement. And we've seen this beta tested years ago between what was called the Turkish, Indian, Iranian trifecta, and that, or known as the Indo-Persian Turkish workaround, where they were settling payments exactly for oil and gas.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah, totally amazing. And this was the beta test, and that's why ever since this whole stock market bubble has come apart, that while we tend to take the problems we have in our economy and shove it into Wall Street, where we're seeing the Dow going sky high, what the Chinese and the Russians are doing, they are stocking up on a physical economy. They're stocking up on gold. And I think Trump understands it. That's why he's trying to ramp up U.S. manufacturing, because when this thing goes bust, we need to have a physical economy in place, number one. And number two, we got to have some sort of honest currency in place as well. So that's the difference here. So the West's power in order for them to build up their military, this, that, and the other, was this fictitious, phony, baloney economy that was running in the entire Western banking system. That fictitious thing it's soon to come to an end.
I must admit that real change, like if they actually bring manufacturing here, I'm really puzzling over. I thought it was just some strange political stunt during the campaign to talk about populism and the Midwest and manufacturing and all that kind of stuff, because I never heard any currents of that ever. So that just was completely made up. And I thought they're just trying to create a meme that justifies the rise of Trump, which is their creation. I don't know. But now, the further along, and then when he does stuff that like deliberately blows himself up, like the executive order about the immigration had a bomb in it. Like that thing was a bomb about people like in the air who were not going to be able to land and come to their destination, who had valid US papers. I mean, it was so obvious that that was a problem that I was thinking that they were blowing stuff up on purpose, that they were taking all their campaign promises and hitting them so hard that they would self-destruct, and it would just look like incompetence, which is the favorite excuse of the, the shadow government, pretend it isn't happening. But if this manufacturing thing is real, and like Brexit, if it really happens, it might not happen still, but if it really happens, then to me that is a paradigm shifting thing, and I'm more inclined to think that maybe they let the East get, a little bit too far ahead. And but like when you talk about Africa, I had a funny experience. I was in an Uber with an African dude who said he was going to go back. It was so funny. He said he never drank or did drugs or anything like that, and he's like a hard worker. He said, except for weed every day. I was like, dude, he considered himself clean. I smoke weed every day. So I said,
smoke weed every day.
I was like, okay. So, but when I was talking to him, he said he was going to go back to his country. I had a couple of conversations like this, so maybe it was Cameroon. I don't want to malign the Cameroonians if they don't actually behave this way, but he said he was saving his money so he could go back to his home country and get a farm and have 8 wives, and they do all the work, and he's really looking forward to it. And he's 27, and when he's 41, I was like, okay, 41, he's going to go back. And I said, it's not going to be like that when you go back. The whole world is changing deliberately. They go in and infiltrate. And I just guessed, is there a lot of, he said, oh yeah, there are a lot of immigrants. I said, are they Chinese? And he said, yeah. And I had never read that or anything, but I just thought, you hear about China and Africa, and I was thinking the way I look at the whole immigration thing, where they kind of make demographic collapses in the Western world, and then make these welfare floors so that the homegrown Americans won't take those low-paying jobs, just creates this vacuum that sucks poor people from overpopulated countries, totally different cultures, into these Western, it just undermines the culture. But it's also happening in Africa and China. These immigration, artificial immigration flows that are meant to kind of, I have always felt, to break down cultures. And that in itself could be for no other reason. There are many possible reasons, but I'm saying one reason that's good enough to justify it 100% would be that it plays right into the hands of globalists, world government people who want nationalism to stop, which is why, of course, nationalism and immigration stuff that's happening here, if it's real, would actually, I think it might cause an economic collapse on its own, but
it needs to.
Yeah, but regardless, if it is going to stop, and that would be a complete paradigm shift. But I feel like the immigration stuff that we're looking at is happening all over the world, in the poor countries and the rich countries. Yeah. And that lends itself to the explanation that these forces all come from, have the goal still world government, total globalization, maybe one currency.
Well, but here's the thing. Yeah. Right? When you look at what China's doing in Russia, right? It's not, they're I can't even call it their brand of globalization, and globalization is such a dirty word now, thanks to the West. But their brand of globalization.
I used to love it. I mean, I'm a free trade. I'm an anarcho-capitalist.
Right, exactly.
You know, I mean, to me, I want to be able to. There are no borders.
Right.
I don't mean that in a, if you have welfare states and stuff, but in a 1,000-year plan, the borders are just a way for the government to contain the taxpayers. It's just they argue about borders so they can claim that 10% of that farmer's crops. I mean, I think that's where all the border disputes came from. In Europe back in the day, it was just about who gets the right to the taxes. So I don't recognize the borders, but sorry, globalism is a bad word now.
Right. Yeah, globalism is definitely a bad word. And what the Chinese are doing, you look at their brand, again, what they're doing is not exploitative at all versus what we have done, where in the last 50 years we've overthrown 30 democratically elected governments.
It's awful.
For all sorts.
And then
the body count is through the roof.
And you take what they do, like I think Libya is a good example, where they take a country that has a wealth of resources. Egypt has the Suez Canal, and it impoverishes them and then indebts them and puts liens on their resources,
right.
whether it's natural or human. Say it again.
And that's all done. That's all over with.
That would be great.
I was in a meeting where I met with the ambassador of Egypt, as well as Professor Xu, and I don't know his full name, but Professor Xu is close. He was actually, college roommates with President Xi Jinping, and he's part of Xi Jinping's inner circle. And the ambassador of Egypt, I think his name is, I forgot his name as well, Islamic name. But one of the things they were discussing was the New Silk Road, and I was at the meeting at the Schiller Institute in Manhattan, and we were also discussing the new Suez zone. And what I've seen and what they present, I've taken photographs of it. I think I tweeted out a picture or two on my tweet where you can go in there and find this was beginning of the year. But what I found there was just so remarkable what they're doing. They're expanding the Suez Canal. The amount of investment that's coming in, not only from Russia and China, but from the UAE, from Qatar, from Israel, how they're investing in the Suez Canal. It's going to be a major, huge trade hub and shipping hub. It's going to be their Silicon Valley, their manufacturing, their trade, and a massive port with the canal built all around there, and a city with resorts in the whole 9 yards. So it's going to be like Sharm el-Sheikh right there on the river near the canal. It's going to be incredible. And then the pipeline deals that are connecting, again, with the new Silk Road coming out of Syria, going into Libya, Lebanon, and connecting to the Leviathan platform that Israel's building, all being connected. And who's the architects behind this? It's those who are non-aligned countries. These countries that are not aligned with what these crazy Atlanticists are doing.
But what you're talking about, and Israel, Qatar, and the UAE are, satellites of the U.S. And now Lebanon, Syria, and Libya have been conquered by the U.S. So to the extent those are,
here's a little bit of a quick update. Guess who's coming back to Libya?
Not Saif Gaddafi.
Saif and Aisha.
Which Saif?
Gaddafi.
Al-Islam or his brother? Can you believe it? He has 2 kids named Saif Gaddafi.
I don't know.
The one who lost his finger?
Who was in the Hague. The one who was in the Hague.
Yeah, I think that's Saif al-Islam. Wasn't he like a captive of one of the competing governments of Libya? I've been talking a lot about him lately because he called Dennis Kucinich and years ago saying, hey, man, we've got these weird mercenary rebels cutting people's heads off. Come help us. And then we blew the country up. Yep. But Kucinich's phone and his secretary's phone and everything were completely tapped. His conversation was totally leaked. Kucinich was like, I have no idea who had that. So all this stuff about they tap stuff, they leak stuff. It's old news, an open secret. Absolutely. Sorry to get tangential, but really, is he coming back?
Yeah, Saif and his sister Aisha, who is incredibly popular, is coming back. Russia has met with Libyan leaders to help stabilize that area because they're kind of cleaning up our mess right now. And when you look at that, you look at the fact that Syria, I'd say right now is probably about 95 to 97% liberated at this point. So it's quite remarkable to see these advancements, and then how Putin has Netanyahu on a short leash.
What do
It's
you mean
quite remarkable.
liberated? Liberated from Assad or liberated from
No,
ISIS?
liberated from USIS. I like to call them
ISIS?
USIS, not ISIS. USIS. Because
ISIS?
it's
ISIS is up.
USIS. I know. ISIS
Sorry.
is us, so it's USIS.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Get it?
I coined that years ago. I'm widely credited as having been first with the ISIS is us. But yes,
ISIS is us.
so you're saying Assad is totally in control. There's going to be no geographical breakup of Syria.
There possibly might be. That's one of the things that are on the table for discussion. But
Okay.
but overall as a whole, most Syrians will probably want to see their country held together, and those Sykes-Picot drawn in borders to remain. So that's one thing. The other thing also with Qatar, I mean, Qatar sees that this whole entire getting involved in this energy war with the Saudis and the Americans going after Assad. The Qataris are starting to realize, wait a minute, this is not a way we want to get our LNG, our liquid natural gas, into the European markets. And the fact that Germany is on the verge of completely flipping towards the east, as well as the Turks. I mean, Erdogan just survived a CIA coup. So Erdogan,
Yes.
I'm no big fan of him, but he is like, I'm out of here.
That coup has more layers to that onion than I could peel. I have to say, I could keep peeling it, and it pops up like Erdogan knew it was coming. Pops up, oh, it was the CIA. Pops up, oh, Erdogan knew it was the CIA. Just that's a weird one, but I do like when you talk about Germany. That is one thing that historically anyway, I think was very real. That like the world wars were really about separating Germany from Russia and
Correct,
also
1000%.
keeping them subordinate to the EU and that regional hegemon competition they have going on, which is that's what I don't understand, why Brexit gives Europe to Germany. Germany then is the hegemon of Europe. That's the thing that again, that's another thing that's like, it doesn't fit into my paradigm. I have to, and I'm not one to shoehorn. I got to rethink the paradigm, but I can't give up on I find it hard to believe because they had it all. I think this rebellion that Trump represents was fomented by the powers that be over the last year or two, not suppressed by it. Now, maybe they saw it coming because the Tea Party was pretty powerful, and they know because they do their models and they see where things are going.
This rebellion was not fomented by the elites.
I think it was. I think Jeff Zucker.
I know exactly. Well, no. You know who fomented? I know exactly who fomented this rebellion.
All right, give me a minute.
All right, give me a minute.
Fomented, not a whole minute, but who?
Oh, okay.
I'm not gonna give you. You can time me, but a minute of me thinking isn't very good radio. So I'm just gonna let you go for it. What? Who?
We did.
We did.
No
way,
was us.
bro.
It was our mass.
I'm a Ron Paul libertarian.
Think about it. It was us. If you think about it, they let the genie out of the bottle. What was the genie? DARPA decided to wire a couple of computers together, and boom, the internet was born.
Man, I think the internet was a setup, and it still is.
Man, I know something though. There is a life in the wire, and it's undeniable. There really is. If you think about it, I mean, all of us are inputting our very thoughts, are pretty much the deepest things of our consciousness online.
But you know what their answer to that is? They like that. They want that. That plays into them. And then their answer to us is they have the tools to sort it. We do not. So then they make the real news, fake news, disinformation.
Right. But that's also blown up in their face. But here's the funny part. If you look at one of the guys, I forgot his name. CJ, do you remember the name of the guy who worked for the NSA?
The whistleblower that came out lately?
I think so. The guy who worked in the data mining operation, where he's like, well, we got these, petabytes and gigabytes and teraflops of data.
Tom Price, or what was that guy? No, Tom Price is the healthcare guy. There's Bill Binney, and then there was,
I don't remember the name.
His name was like pace or dice.
I don't know. I'm not sure. But one of the things that he said was, and it's been validated by a few other sources, these guys have set up this massive data mining operation. And the data mining operation is like, okay, now it's like, you're trolling the ocean floor. You've got this gigantic amount of data, but what the hell do you do with it? They just literally don't have the manpower or the computing power to take every single thing apart now. Now they're like...
I think that's what Utah is for. That big data center in Utah that's what they did Siri for. They invented voice to text was never going to be viable, like commercially viable.
Out of this. You leave Siri out of this.
Sorry, you love Siri.
Okay.
You want to see Siri and Alexa in a twosome?
Siri and Alexa is like a battle royal between the two.
But yes, I feel like they actually, the reason they developed a voice to text was because text was so much easier to store and to search, and that's what that's all about. That they already cracked that code. Is it Thomas Drake? I just used my little supercomputer for that.
Thomas Drake sounds right. Yeah, I think it's Drake.
He was the one that. So I think that they do. I feel like we are overwhelmed by information. That was their answer to this, and they always knew that's what it was going to be. So first we give them everything. That's the surveillance side, and then they have the censorship and the propaganda, but it's really just being overwhelmed. It's cognitive dissonance. I mean, if I can't figure it out, and I'm a person who spends, as far as like an educated voter, I read this stuff all day long, and all I do is try to think about it. I've been highly educated, got some horsepower. If I can't figure it out, then it's not a system that's suitable for like a democracy. The average voter is not going to be able to make heads or tails out of it.
Mm. Right, exactly. And so you look at, you look at that whole entire thing, and plus the fact they're blinded by their own hubris. They always underestimate the power of human culture. Like Germans, at the end of the day, Germans are starting to wake up and starting to realize it is better for us to be German. I'd rather be called Hans than Ahmed.
Yeah, they were on the run though for decades. I mean,
you heard about what the Swedes are doing? They're right now like. I got a text from a buddy of mine who's got back from overseas. He's like, Swedish girls are trying to find American men to escape Sweden. They want to get married and get the hell out of Sweden.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the descendants of Vikings. What happened?
I know. I thought that too. I was like, you're Vikings. Like, you have to stand up.
What happened, you guys?
Grow a pair.
Yeah, seriously.
But that's why the wall seems silly to me, because Sweden demonstrates and Germany demonstrates that its policies and politicians, they have worse problems than we do as far as immigration goes. It's not about the tactics of keeping them out, and we're just standing at the border with our Uzis scratching our heads like, gee, what do you do to keep people from coming over here? It's not the wall is not the answer. It's the policies. And if you look at that, William Weld and Heidi Cruz wrote that. Did you see that document, a Council on Foreign Relations document called the North American Union?
Oh, yeah.
About breaking down all the barriers. And they had like secret groups that were going to help the legislators normalize laws, and they were going to try to pass something that made the law of the most restrictive country, so a labor law or minimum wage law or whatever in Canada was automatically going to be the law in the US and Mexico. So they were trying to do it through policy. So the wall isn't an answer to policy, and that's what Sweden and Germany have problems with. It's a true pathocracy. It's a government that works against the interests of the people who empower it.
Right, exactly, and it's a huge problem. Then you can, at the same time, you can't have these cultures who are completely incompatible, with our way of life.
And that's what I said. I have my former au pair is Swedish, and she lived with us. And I would say to her, and she was telling me about this, she can't get an apartment because they're actually earmarked for immigrants and refugees.
It's terrible.
And stuff. Yeah, and I'm saying to her, like, why? She said, oh, there are a lot of Somalians and Iraqis. And I said to her, really? Because there's a civil war in Ukraine, which is like 5 minutes away. Why? It's a lot more culturally compatible. I'm sure if you absolutely have to have millions of refugees, you could surely get them from Ukraine I mean, if you think
Right.
about the geography of those places, they're all kind of Russian. You could just, it makes a lot more sense. And why would they not do that? I mean, it's a policy.
But you know what? It doesn't fit in with Soros and the globalists and Ziggy B's plan
Yes.
of their technocratic world government. It doesn't kind of fit in with that mold. So that's why, the Somalis and Iraqis and the Islamic horde back in Europe again makes more sense to them.
But then
Terrible.
you're taking Chinese by the millions and putting them in Africa. So
they're not taking the Chinese and putting them.
No,
Chinese
I'm
are
not.
willingly going.
They're what?
They're willingly going.
I'm just saying, okay, regardless of who's like behind it, happens to be that the cultures those people are coming from, leaving behind, are also being forever displaced by a new culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it just all feeds into that world government thing where there's absolutely nothing but, there's no place to look but up. Look up, like upsourcing. You look up to the government that's higher rather than to your community.
Right. And this time around, what's happening is it's blowback, where now you're seeing, a lot of the Germans and Swedes and Europeans that are starting to wake up. They're seeing this influx, and they're seeing the abject, emasculated, total failure of their government, and they're looking up and they're like, "Why are you guys in power? We're going to overthrow you." That's what they're terrified of. This whole thing is kind of blown up in their face.
You don't see any element of a deliberate reaction. I mean, these people were weaned on fear of Nazis, not Germans, but people outside, like the European community generally. Europeans, when you talk to them, they're absolutely terrified of fascism and Nazism. And if they see Brexit and Trump and maybe the right sector, not right sector, but the right movements in Germany, maybe they will. I mean, if they actually have democracy by the numbers and just go out and vote, I would say the vast majority of Europeans would vote towards globalism before they would vote towards nationalism, because they fear the nationalism of Germany, of the US.
I mean, I guess, but when you look at like places like Sweden, where you're rape right now, you're the rape capital of the world per capita. Your rape went up 1,300%, where 2% of the population is committing 80% of the rapes. Then there's a problem. That's for, I guess the Hegelian dialectic works both ways, and I think the elite have kind of forgotten that.
I think I don't want to be contrarian, but my Swedish friend told me that they changed the way. I'm not arguing with it. I absolutely agree there's problems there. I know there are. She says there are, but they also did change the way rapes were calculated and reported. I think they're playing into that, probably for that dialectical reason, to make people more agitated, because that's another thing. Agitating the population against itself is a great way for people to call for more policing, more government power.
Sure. But that's great that you say that. But the problem is there is no policing, there is no government lockdown, there's no government power. The government's
there will be.
At what point? I mean, already we've had like mass rapes occur, televised, live stream on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. We see
maybe
it
it has to escalate to the point where you have a state of emergency, so you can have martial law and just throw it all out the window. I'm afraid of that for here. I'm afraid that's what's going on here.
Well, you look at the two riots they had at Rinkeby, where things were like literally burning into the ground in Rinkeby and Malbo. The perfect time to crack down. What do?
Yeah.
They just did nothing. They're terrified. The Europeans are absolutely emasculated and terrified.
I don't know. I mean, I believe you, but I'm just saying, I'm afraid that this is playing into a mass, like the government creates problems and then creates solutions that were really the point of creating the problem. That's what they do.
Correct. And that's the dialectic they've been running for several decades. The question is that starting to fail? And I think that luster that they once had is severely damaged. Now there's solutions in this world where there wasn't any solutions before. I mean, look at the mechanisms of control that the greatest power these people have is their ability to control your perception. They've lost that.
Absolutely. Yes, totally. Yes, but they don't. They're not, right? These perceptions that you and I think we're having, are they not generated by the glowing boxes that we're staring at?
Yeah, again, when you look at it again, right? The life in the wire. It's our consciousness. It's our thought.
Mhm.
Boom, exactly. It's social media. I mean, and then you have idiots like Facebook that we're gonna stop free speech.
I know.
Everything is up for disruption right now. Bitcoin is disrupting banking. It's social. There's going to be. I mean, look at Gab. What Gab is about to do to Twitter, and there's going to be other ventures out there that are going to be soon and coming. That's going to be going after the Facebooks of the world and all the social
Yes,
media
I
giants
love
and start
that.
taking them out.
Don't you worry?
The internet's getting decentralized.
Do you not worry that Bitcoin plays into the cashless society thing, which I fear?
No, because how can you control it? Like, who controls it? In order for a cashless society to work, it has to be vertically integrated.
Well, you could just unplug. If what if the grid goes down?
Okay, goes down where? Globally? Then we're all
I
screwed.
don't know. Wherever. Yeah.
Okay, well,
globally,
let's just say
globally.
well, look at Texas, right? The whole state of Texas has its own power grid separate from the United States.
I just feel like if you're out on the road, like during a civil unrest situation, I guess you're down to barter anyway. Paper isn't going to help you.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, you're down to barter. But at that point, that's called straight up, Mad Max scenario.
Yeah,
And at that point,
there was a movie called The Road.
Yeah,
I was thinking about
that was a depressing movie.
Oh my gosh, there was nothing but depressing. There was no plot or anything. It was just
No, I wanted to smack that kid half the time. I'm like,
the whole thing.
You're a kid that grew up in chaos. Be more tough. Grow up.
Awful. But it did make me want to keep a sack of silver dimes in my car just in case. I just always thought silver dimes. I don't care. I don't want to argue the value of different kinds of money. I think a silver dime is always going to get me a gallon of gas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got my Pokemon cards just in case.
Your Nintendo mobile.
Yeah, my Nintendo mobile unit. Please use this. It's a Nintendo Switch. But there's no power. I'm sure there's silver in there somewhere.
Exactly.
Oh my God. Monica, it has been, I can't believe the hour's already up. And this is what happens when you come on and join us. It's been super awesome. Hey, give out your website, your social media.
Oh, yeah.
How people can follow you, and your radio show.
Yes, the best place to get all my social media stuff, my podcast, everything like that is propagandareportdaily.com. Propagandareportdaily.com is where you can get everything. But I also have a terrestrial radio show on WSB in Atlanta, Saturdays from 3 to 6. So you can listen to that if you're in Atlanta, 750 AM, 95.5 FM, or iHeartRadio, it's WSB Atlanta. So that's where you can get all my stuff. Thank you very much for the plug.
Awesome, possum. And with that being said, guys, I am the one, the mystic gorilla, and CJ is the CJ. What are you, man?
Right now I'm just, the conversation was awesome, and I'm writing down just so that I can get the description correct, so that way I don't get a text message in an hour that I didn't have.
Guilty.
I feel a little guilty. In.
I'm contrarian.
He is the descriptive druid, CJ. And then we have Monica the contrarian Perez. And I love it. There you go. There you go. I love it. I love it. It's great. Thank you all for listening in, and enjoy your all weekends, and we'll be back again at some point. Hasta la pasta, everybody. CJ, take it away.